Transitions! There's tons of them even in the free version of Davinci Resolve. From simple pushes and dissolves to glitch, mosaic, page curl, and even burn. And if you think there are transitions missing, let me know, because I'm on a mission to create some new transition packs for Davinci Resolve, so I need to know exactly what you want. Oh, and before we get into it, this video is sponsored by Audiio. Using the code ALEX199, you can get lifetime access to their entire music catalogue forever for just a one-off payment of $199. But more on those a little bit later. So, first up, where exactly do you find these transitions in Resolve? Let's take a look. So here we are on the edit page within Davinci Resolve, and if we click on Effects in the top left-hand corner, we'll open up our Effects library down here. If we expand Toolbox to make sure that's open, and within there, we've got video transitions and we've got audio transitions. Within our video transitions list, we've got things like dissolve, iris, motion, shape, and wipe. These are all your standard Davinci Resolve transitions. If you keep scrolling down, we've got these fusion transitions, which are some really cool, unique looking video transitions, which you can use as well. And lastly, right near the bottom, we've got Resolve FX transitions, and there's a nice burn away within there as well. Sweet, now you've found them, how exactly do you preview them? Well, that's easy as well. If we put our playhead over the edit point, we want to see the transition, we want to preview it, then we're going to go to our video transitions, make sure to click on these three little dots, and make sure your hover scrub preview is enabled, and then you can simply hover your mouse over any of these transitions to preview the transition and see what it's going to look like on that edit point. If we move our playhead to a different edit point, let's find a different transition, we can see what it's going to look like on that one instead. Now applying them is just as easy. So if I grab this center wipe, I'm simply going to click my mouse, hold, drag, and just drop it directly onto the edit point like so. Alternatively, if you put your playhead near an edit point, it doesn't even need to be on it, just needs to be close to any edit point on the timeline, and then we can simply double click any of the transitions within the effects library, and it'll automatically add that transition to that nearest edit point. So if we go to a different one over here, double click on spiral wipe, and it will put it on there like so. You can even apply transitions to multiple different edit points in one go. All we need to do, we click and hold our mouse and we select all of the edit points where we want to apply our transition. With that done, we simply go to the effects library, find the transition that we want, we right click, and then we add to selected edit points and clips, and it will drop the transition on all of those different edit points like so. If we want to get rid of any, we can just give them a click, hit delete to delete them from our timeline. Easy. Next up, alignment. I know I've done this a million times. You've dropped the transition on there, you've put it on slightly the wrong place, and you want to move it either to the middle, to the right, or to the left. Well, by default, when you click and drag, it won't move, which seems like you're going to have to delete it and start again. But you don't. If you simply right-click on the transition on the timeline, there's three options at the top. Start on edit, which will put it over on the right-hand side. There's end on edit, which will be on the left-hand side. And center on edit, which will put it right in the middle. Alternatively, with the transition highlighted, open up the inspector, top right-hand corner, and there's these three alignment buttons, which do the same thing. Left-hand side, center, right-hand side. But what about when your transition just won't apply? Well, that's due to something called handles. So if I grab any of my transitions, it won't go on this point. No matter what I do, I can't add this transition here. I can add it over here, just not on this transition point. And why is that? Well, Davinci Resolve needs a bit of overlap. So there's actually no additional footage to the left of this clip here, which means we can't add a transition to this point. Now, it does give you a hint about this, because if we click on this transition point here, you can see the highlighted area is red, whereas over here, it's green. So if it's red, that's telling you there's not enough handles to add a transition point. So what I can do is if I grab this icon here, it's the trim edit mode, and I roll this clip back to give us a bit of an overlap between these clips. Now if I click on this edit point, you can see the right-hand side is green, so the right-hand side does have overlap, but the left-hand side still doesn't, which means we can put the edit point over here, but not over here. If we was to just trim this one as well to give us a bit of overlap this side, now that edit point is completely green and we can add our video transitions. So you've just got to make sure there's that little bit of overlap. Now, if we've got this edit point highlighted here, and we go to any of the transitions within the effects library, we right click and we add to the selected edit points and clips, it's actually going to tell us exactly that. Some of the clips selected have insufficient handles to apply the transition. You can either trim the clips and shorten your timeline or skip those clips entirely. So if we click on trim clips, it's actually just going to do that trimming for us and then put the transition on the edit point like so. Now we've got them applied, how do you adjust the length? So with this transition on our timeline, to adjust the length, we simply grab either the left or right hand edge, and then we click and drag to adjust the length as required. Alternatively, you can right click on the transition on the timeline, and there's an option to change the transition duration, or you can use the keyboard shortcut of Control and D, so then we can manually set that within here. Or an even easier way, open up the inspector once again, top right hand corner, and there is a duration. So we can click in either the seconds, hold our mouse and we can drag left and right, or we can manually enter a number in there, or we can do the same thing with the frames. If you want all of the transitions to be a particular length, let's say I want all of mine to be 1.5 seconds, I set that duration and then I simply click set as default duration. And then every time I add a new transition onto the timeline, it's always going to be 1.5 seconds in length. Bosh, easy. Now, you can also copy transitions directly on the timeline really quickly and easily. So I've got this transition here and I want to copy it. There's a few options. What we can do is give it a click so it's highlighted in red, hit Control and C or Command and C if you're on a Mac. Then if we click on this edit point, so the edit point is highlighted green like so, then simply hit Control or Command and V, it will copy and paste that transition. You can also do this over multiple different edit points. So if I copy this transition once again, I'm going to click on this edit point, hold Control or Command, and then click on this one as well, so that they are both highlighted. Then we'll Control and V, and it'll paste that transition across. Now, one final way, if we give the transition a click, and then hold the Alt key or Option if you're on a Mac, keeping the Option key held, if we click and then drag, we can simply copy these transitions across. Now I need to just take a moment to thank this video's sponsor, Audiio. Audiio is a music subscription service that has a highly curated selection of music and sound effects which you can use on basically any project. There's the Audiio Pro license, which gives you unlimited downloads of all of their music and sound effects, and it's available for a special price of just $59 for your first year. Or if it's just the music you need, you can get lifetime access to all of their music for a one-off payment of just $199. Both the Pro and that lifetime music license gives you access to their brand new AI-generated playlists and AI-powered similar song search with Audiio Bolt. So to get started, simply head over to audio.com/Alex. There's a link down in the description below, and use the code ALEX70 if you want that Pro license, and ALEX199 for that awesome lifetime music license. Right, let's transition back to the transitions. Now you'll notice with a lot of these transitions, they don't look all that great. And that's because they're linear. They don't have any acceleration or deceleration in them. They're just kind of a constant meh. You can make all of these transitions look better by changing the easing. So we've got this push transition on our timeline, and if we hit play, it looks a little bit boring. So if we simply give it a click, open up the inspector, within the transition controls, we have ease, and by default, it's set to none, which is of course linear. If we change this, we've got in, out, in and out. So in will mean that it's slow at the beginning and then accelerates towards the end. Out will reverse that. So it'll start off fast and then slow down. And then in and out will give us a nice S curve, which is commonly used in animation. So it'll start off slow, speed up in the middle, and then slow down at the end, giving us a generally much nicer looking animation. Now this is actually visualized on the timeline with this little line on the transition itself. So with none, it's a straight line, and in and out, we get this nice little S curve. Now that's the same for all of these standard transitions, so things like the dissolves, iris, shapes, and wipes. However, it's slightly different for these fusion transitions located towards the bottom. Many of these don't have ease controls because they have their acceleration, they have their animation already baked in because they're built in Fusion. However, some, like the rotate, for example, does have easing, but it looks slightly different. So within the inspector, once again, we have curve. We need that to be set to easing rather than linear. And then we have these in and out controls. So rather than just having a standard S curve, you can actually change the acceleration. You can change the look. Now, the easiest thing to do with these is kind of just to play around to see which ones you like. But as a general rule of thumb, the ones at the top of the list are kind of mellow. This will give you a relatively slow acceleration curve. And the further down the list you go, let's go with Circ. This will be much faster and much more aggressive. You've also got some fun ones to play with at the bottom, like Back, Elastic, and Bounce, which will give you different effects. So have a play with those until you find something that you're happy with. If in doubt, in and out. Can't go wrong with that. But if in and out isn't quite good enough, you can also set your own custom curve. So you can adjust these transitions to have your version of the acceleration that you want to get them looking perfect. So with these standard transitions like push once again, give it a click, inspector, we've got the ease. This time round, we're going to go to in and out. And then on the transition, we've got this little keyframe icon. If we give that a click, we've got push. And then if we give this S curve icon a click, we can actually see that transition curve that's being applied to our push. And then from here, we can actually adjust it. So if we click on the keyframes, we can adjust this. We can make the curve a little bit more aggressive if we want to. We can make it so it kind of has to accelerate lows at the beginning and then fade out at the end. And we can just come in and customize these curves to make the transition look however we like. Now, in that same place, in the inspector, there's always a bunch of different controls which allow you to customize this transition as well. Now, exactly what controls you'll see would depend on which transition you have open, but they're generally pretty similar, kind of self-explanatory, but let me give you a quick few examples to show you how it all works. So the slide transition is a good example. On the timeline, give it a click, open up the inspector, and we have a bunch of different controls. So by default, it's going to slide in from the left, but we've got this preset we can change. Slide right, left, bottom up, top down, top left, bottom right. So we can just change that as required. We also then get direction. So we can change these just to customize the transition. We've also then got border. So we can add a border on this if we want. If we add a bit of a border and then click feather, we can have a feathered edge instead. And with the border selected, we can actually change the color of the border to be something else. We've also got motion blur, so we can just knock that right up, change the in and out to in and out, and then we've got a pretty different looking transition. This hexagon iris even has a rotation, and what you can do, if you're feeling particularly fancy, is keyframe it. So at the beginning, it's going to be minus 360 degrees. I'll add a keyframe. At the end of the transition, I want this to be 0. And now it's a rotating hexagon. So you can come in, customize this however you like. And then once you've done all that hard work, if you've changed your mind, you no longer like the star wipe, you want to change it to a push or a cross dissolve or a left triangle or whatever it may be, you can do that really quickly using this little drop down right at the top. And it's called transition type. So this is a hexagon iris. I've changed the easing and I've added a colored border. But if I've changed my mind, I can change the transition type to something like iris instead, and it's going to change it to be a completely different transition, but it's going to keep the easing we set, the border, and the custom color. So rather than having to delete it, add it again, and then reset it up, you can simply change the transition type like so. Now, quick note, that doesn't work for the fusion transitions. It only works for these standard transitions above. So if I was to grab any of these fusion transitions, we do get, obviously, the customization controls, but we don't get that transition type option. So we can't quickly switch between them. And here's a quick PSA for you all. Transitions aren't just for videos. You can also use these on titles to just whip a title in and out. You can use them on PNGs, which can be a really quick, handy way to get a logo to pop in or whip out or dissolve or whatever you want. You can even use them on solid color, which is a really nice way of creating chapter screens, titles, and all that sort of fun stuff. And let's not forget the super useful audio transition, which can help you just go from one volume to another really quickly without messing around with keyframes. So I've got some music set up on my timeline, and I want to just duck the audio and make it quieter in one particular point. What we can do is simply do a cut. So I'm going to do Control or Command and B to do a quick cut. On this second audio clip here, we're just going to open up the inspector and reduce the volume. And then we simply go to Audio Transitions, and we're going to grab the Crossfade 0 dB, and we'll put that on that edit point like so. And then what's going to happen is the volume is simply going to fade down over that point. Now, the really cool thing with doing it that way is then you can just grab this edit point, move it left and right on the timeline to get this kind of fade in the exact point. You can even make the fade a little bit shorter, and it's much easier than messing around with keyframes. Now, you've messed with all of these transitions, whether it's the standard ones or whether it's the Fusion ones, you're probably going to want to save them. Fortunately, there's a real quick and easy way to do that as well, using transition presets. So I've got this triangle left set up, we've put a bit of an easing on it and a border, and I want to save it. All you do on the timeline, you right click the transition, and there is an option, Create Transition Preset. We're going to give this a name, Transition Left Border, and then click on OK. Now if I just delete this from the timeline, within my video transitions area, if we scroll down, we now have a users area, and we can see Triangle Left Border. We simply give it a click, drag it on, add it in exactly the same way you'd usually add any of your transitions, hit play, and it's the same transition, but it's got all of our customization. Saved, boom, easy access whenever you want them. Now what you can also do is set any of these transitions to be your standard transitions. Now this is useful because it means you can apply them with a simple keyboard shortcut without even having to open up the effects library. To make any transition the standard transition, that includes any user-generated ones as well, you simply right-click it within the effects library and we set as standard transition. You know it's done because you'll get this little red icon in the top left-hand corner. Then, if you right-click on any edit point, it will say, do you want to add that standard transition? And you can add it for 8 frames, 16 frames, 32 frames, or 64. So we can just give that a click and it's going to add that transition to that point. You can also set a separate audio standard. As you can see, when I added this, I've got my triangle left and my crossfade. Same thing in the audio transitions, my crossfade is set as the default. We've got our red icon. We could change this if we wanted to by clicking on any of the other transitions. Now you can also do this via a keyboard shortcut instead. So if I just delete these transitions, we highlight this edit point here. If I do Shift and T, it's just going to add the audio transition only. If we do Alt and T, it's going to add the video transition only. And if we do Control and T, it will add both to that edit point, both my standard video transition and my standard audio transition. And if you want to know how to create some of your own fancy, snazzy Fusion transitions from scratch, stick around because I'll be making some tutorials coming up very soon. Thanks for watching, take it easy, leave your thoughts and feelings down in the comment section below. I'll catch you next time.